Alright, so we're going to look today at how to use HTML5 video and audio objects within our HTML and learn how we can use the APIs for them in JavaScript to adjust, to make changes to them. Okay, so the biggest thing about HTML5 video and audio is that we have access to every bit of the data. So previously, up until recent years, our only option was to use something like Flash or Silverlight or QuickTime, which all required plugins in the browser, and we didn't have any access to the data, to the video data or the audio data that wasn't designed into Flash or QuickTime or something like that. So we're always very limited. They were sort of like black boxes that we could put in our code, but we couldn't do anything with them. And so with HTML5 video and audio elements and the APIs that go with them, we've got the opportunity to affect any change. We can use JavaScript to start them, stop them, play them, see how much is loaded, jump to different parts of it, adjust the volume, to do just about anything we want to. And we have access to every frame, as we'll see in a later video, to be able to make changes on a pixel by pixel basis if we wanted to for the video. So it gives us a whole new range of possibilities to have these video and audio objects. So let's look at what we have to do to start off with. The element is just going to be video, and then of course the audio one will be just audio. Now what we're going to look at with everything is we're going to use video as an example, but all the same API stuff is available for audio as it is for video. So we're going to use video as a demonstration, but keep in mind you can still use the same things that you learned with the audio object as well. So when we define a video, just like we have like an unordered list or something like that, where we've got nested elements that are specific to that element, well, video has the same thing, and it's got an element called source. And source is great because we can define multiple sources. So with HTML5 video at this point in time, not every browser supports playing different video. Since we're not using plugins, it's up to the browser to determine what kind of videos it can play, what kind of video codecs and video types it can play. And so we give it a list of options basically. We say, okay, here's a couple of different formats of the same video, and each browser picks and chooses the ones that they can use. And there's two formats right now that cover pretty much the whole spectrum, and that's the WebM format and the H.264, the MP4 format. Another very popular one is the OGG format, OGG. We'll use that today just because I have the video files of that. WebM is somewhat preferable because it's got a little bit better compression, and so the quality versus file size is a little bit better than OGG. So as the support improves, WebM is going to be the better choice. So we can come in and define a source attribute inside that, and just basically give it our names. Here's .mov, which is the same codec as MP4, generally speaking. And we can come in and say, here's the type, and this is going to be the file type. So we'll say video MOV, and then we'll say source, and we'll have a source attribute. This will be our alternate. We'll say video.ogg. Alright, so these would be good if it was a local video, but in our case we've actually, since we're on JSBin, we don't have access to any storage there, so let's say these are located on my server, WebD2300 video. Let's copy and paste that part of the URL. So now you can see we have a video showing up over there. Now there's a couple of things of attributes that we could apply to this. We could say controls. You'll see it pops down here. It's got built-in controls. Now these are the controls that are determined by the browser. So you can see it's got playback, progress, volume, full screen, time, things like that. The only difficulty is that it looks different in every browser, and the browser can change over time to how it displays those playback options. So if you want control yourself, you can actually create HTML elements like buttons and things like that and control the video with it. And so they've given us the option of removing those controls or not having them there by default because we can control it so many different ways. You can also say something like loop, and that's going to say, okay, just play this video over and over. We also would want to be able to set the size, so we could say 320. That gives us a little bit smaller video. You could also define a height if you wanted to. So let's actually do something with this now. Okay, so we could come in, let's add the jQuery library, add our document ready function. Alright, so that should be ready. And then let's add some buttons here. Let's say div class controls. And inside those controls, let's create a play button. And let's see, so say type equals button. Let's give it a class of play pause. So I'm going to use a combination of jQuery and CSS to make this button show play if the video is not playing and pause if it is. So in order to do that, we can set something, we can have both alternate text in here and have a different class around each one of them. So I can say, let's wrap a span tag with a class of play around the play button and a span class of pause around the pause button. Then in CSS I can come in here and say dot play pause dot pause, which is that span tag, has a property of display none, so it disappears. And what we're going to do is we're going to have jQuery add another class to this button whenever the video is actually playing. And then we're going to have a class of playing. So we could come in and say dot play pause dot playing dot pause. So this will only be executed if that extra class has been assigned. And we could go back and say display inline. And then we'll need the opposites of these. This is just using a little bit of CSS to make sure that we're not having to add and remove text with JavaScript, which if we can avoid that is always a good thing, because JavaScript and jQuery should be changing behavior of the page but not the content in many cases. So let's come in here and say play pause dot playing dot play. So this is saying hide the play button if it's playing, and then the reverse, so that when we select it back the other way, say not playing. Now that one's probably not necessary, but it never hurts to have it in there. So now these both are going to flip both ways, and we would come in, and since whenever we're going to do something with a button, of course we have to have an event listener. So I can come in and say dot play pause on click, which we've looked at this quite a bit, function, close function, close method. So inside here is where we could say this dot add class playing. So now if we run this, it's not going to play the video. Oh, it's not going to do that either. Let's see where I've got a typo here. Okay, I had a typo in the ready function. So now you can see when I run this, and I click play, it changes to pause. So we've got our button working, but we've kind of jumped the gun as far as the JavaScript goes. So we need to, if we want this button to toggle back and forth, we want it when we click it and this video's not playing, we want it to play it, and then, but if the video is playing, we want it to pause it. So we're going to use an if statement to test and see which is the case. Let's go ahead and set up our if statement then. Say if else, and our condition is going to be a property called .paused. And actually, I jumped ahead of myself even a little bit more, because we need to come in and target the video. So let's say we want to target this. Wouldn't be a bad idea to have an ID on there or something that we can select. So let's come in and say #video. Now we're going to say get 0, because that's saying get the first one. Because if you remember, jQuery automatically returns an object with several, or there might just be one, but it's still an object. And so we want to say don't just get that list of potential objects, but get this specific one. So we're going to say get the very first one that has an index of 0. So we know we're only grabbing one, and this is going to allow us to tie in with the video API. So then we can use that variable here and say video.pause. So if video.paused, then we want to play the video, and the API says that all we got to do is video.play, and this is a method. Otherwise, we say video.paused, which is another method. So then we can take this little snippet that we generated here, and we can put it inside our if statement. So now it's going to play the video, then it's going to add a class of playing, which means we also need to come in here and say, okay, if you're going to pause it, then we need to remove the class. And so we're saying playing. So now we've selected our video object, and we're using the API that's specified on it. We're testing to see if it's paused. If it is, then we hit play. So let's run with JS and see if it plays our video. There we go. It says pause. If I click it again, it doesn't do a thing. So let's come in and look and see what we might have missed here. Okay, I had a typo there, video pause. So now we try to play it. It works. We hit pause, and so we see our buttons toggling and the videos stopping and starting just how we'd like it. So we're good to go there. So now let's go ahead and see if we can add a progress bar. So we're going to need to add a little HTML first. We've got our controls box. Let's add a div with a class of progress. And then inside that, we're going to want to have little progress bars like you see on most videos that shows two different things. We want to see how far the video's loaded, and we want to see how far we've played into the video. So let's create two bars, and we're going to use HTML to do that. We can say div class equals loading, and these are going to be empty divs, and div class of current. So we'll want to add a little bit of CSS to this. So let's come in and say dot progress, and let's give it a width of 210 pixels, and we could tell it to float left. We want to be able to see it so we know where it's sitting. So let's give it a background color of black, and we need to give it a height since it's mostly empty right now. So 25 pixels. Awesome. So now we see we got a progress bar. Not quite laying out how we'd want it to, but that's okay. could come in and say play pause. And keep them all in the same order. So then we've got these two bars, and we don't want them to show anything up front, but we want to be able to change the width of these bars as a percentage of 100 and have them basically size in through here. So they expand as the JavaScript is setting the width larger and larger. They're going to expand to fill this width. So in order to do that, we need to say position relative. And what that does is says, okay, I know that we're going to assign position absolute to these two divs. And so position relative says any positioning that we do happens relative to this parent div that has the position relative property set. So I'm going to say dot loading, and we're going to have some properties that are good for both of these bars. So we're just going to assign a few to each one of them. Then we're going to assign a different color to each one so that we can differentiate between the two. So we know it's going to have a height of 25 pixels. We can say starting out they need to have a width of 0. We want them, like we said, to be positioned absolute. They should be positioned from the top corner at 0 and the left at 0. So they're going to start right here and expand this way. And that should do what we need for now. So at least for this part. So let's go ahead and assign background colors to these so that when we expand the width we can see what they are. So loading, let's just give that a background color of green, and dot current has a background color of red. Okay, so now we're going to go into JavaScript and we want to know when it's updated. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to do a set interval, because that's going to allow us to continuously come back and check and see what the current value is and keep checking that continuously. So let's come in and say set interval, and we'll create a function called loading progress, and we want it to run, let's say, every half a second. Alright, so then we create that function, loading progress, and in this we need to get a couple of values. We're going to need to know all of the values that we're looking for are going to be in seconds, and so we want to know how long is the video itself. So let's say we need to know the duration. We want to know what the time is for where we are currently. So we can say var current time. And then we want to know how much is loaded. So how many seconds have loaded thus far. So let's say loading. And all of these we can assign some values to. So let's go ahead and say duration equals video dot duration. That's pretty straightforward. That's how the API. Current time is video, and this is a property, current time, also returning in seconds. I forgot to put an equal sign there. And then loading equals video dot buffered dot end. I'm going to say end 0. That's going to give us the end of how far we've buffered thus far, basically, and it's going to return it in seconds. So now we've got these three values. The next thing we need to know is we need to set the percentage. Let's make a note here. Set percentage played, and we'll do something there, and then we're also going to look and say let's set the percentage loaded, and we'll do some stuff there. So let's start with percentage played. We know we could say var played equals current time divided by duration. Now that's going to give us a decimal percentage of 1. And so if we want to get the actual percents, which we'll need, we can say times 100, and that's going to give us an actual number that's a percent of 100 as far as how far we've loaded. So now we want to do something with that. And so we're working on changing the current time, right, the percentage played. So let's reference .current, and we're going to change some CSS, change a CSS property on it, and that's going to be width. So we have a number, but we actually need the CSS to say, you know, some percent, and we can do that just by appending the percent sign to it, and that's going to work. So we can come in and say played plus percent, and that'll be our second parameter in there. Then we come in here and we do practically the same thing, and we're going to say var loaded equals, and instead of current time, we're going to say loading divided by duration, also times 100. Then we come in, and this time we're selecting the loading bar, and we set the CSS width on this to loaded and append the percent sign. Alright, so if this works, then when we hit play, we'll start seeing some values grow here. So you can just barely see the green is keeping ahead of the red, which is what we'd expect. It's actually loading just a little bit faster, so it's buffering ahead of time. That's a good thing. And we also see it's still buffering, and that's okay, but we might not want it to keep checking continuously. That could affect our page load to have this script just running continuously, whether the video is playing or not. So there's two things we can do. We can take this set interval and tell it not to run unless the video is playing. So part of that is done by putting it inside this play action. But that only is part of the solution, because what happens now is that we start it when we click play, but we don't actually stop it. And then if we hit play again, it's going to start another interval up, and so we're going to have it running twice as much. So one way we can do that is by using clear interval. So we come in and we say when we hit pause, let's use clear interval. Now clear interval expects a parameter that references the original set interval, so it knows which interval. If we had multiple, it would know which interval to stop. So in order to do that, we have to assign our set interval to a variable, and since we need to access it in different places, let's create the variable outside of that function, and let's just say, let's call it loop. Alright, so we can come in and say loop equals set interval, so that's still going to work just like it is, but now we can come in and say clear interval loop, and it's going to clear that particular one that was set. So it's not going to be running continuously, it's only going to be checking to see what the progress is if the video is currently playing, and that's going to help us a lot. So let's come in and run JavaScript. You'll see that it jumped there, and that's because we've had this video up for a little bit and it's been buffering, so it's going to figure out that, oh, I've already buffered this far, and kind of jump, and that's okay. So let's look at one more thing we can do as far as the controls for a video go. We might want to change the volume, and that's pretty easy. There's a volume property, video.volume, and it is a value between 0 and 1, 1 being the maximum value that you can have, and 0 being muted, of course. And so we could say video volume equals 0.5. That's about halfway between max and silent, or just about anything. We could set just about any value between 1 and 0. If you set a value less than 0 or greater than 1, it's just going to ignore it. So that's our property. So we need to figure out how to set it. And the first thing we need to do is actually set some buttons that adjust that. And the easiest way we can do that is let's just go outside our progress bar and let's create a div that we put some buttons inside. So I'm actually going to have an individual button for every 10th increment. So people can click anywhere from 0 to 10 to get that particular volume. And probably the easiest way to do that is we can just go ahead and create a button, type equals button, and I'm going to say this one is 0. Now I don't need to actually assign a class or anything to this because I can set an event listener that's going to listen to any button within that class. And let's jump back over here and show what I'm talking about here. So I can say .volume button.on click is function. And that's nice because then any button that we put in there already has this event listener assigned to it. So that saves us creating 10 different event listeners. So then we can come in here and say, okay, we want 10, so it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We could come in and say 2, change all these. And then let's do one more, make this 10. So the problem is our event listener doesn't know which one is which, so we need to get the value back so that when they click on 6 it's going to be just a tenth higher than mid-range for volume. So one way we can do this is by assigning a custom data value. So we said before data, we could just call this V, and we could come in here and say 0. And that's going to allow us in JavaScript to be able to reference that particular one. You remember that anything that starts with data dash is a custom attribute that HTML5 allows. So I could come in here and say data v equals, in this case, 0.1. And so the nice thing is that this is the actual value that we want the volume to be. So I can just go grab that with my event listener and not have to run any calculations on it. I can just take it and use it pretty much as is. Let's go ahead and add this in here. I'm going to hide JavaScript for a second. I want to go back and modify all these values. So this keeps the data within our HTML, but the behavior within our JavaScript. And that's considered good practice. And of course, maximum is going to be 1. Alright, so jumping back to our JavaScript here, we can reference that data value with jQuery's custom data method. So I come in here and say this because I want to get the one of the button that I actually clicked on, data, and then I'm going to say v because that's the custom part of that attribute, data-v. V is our custom part. So let's assign that to a variable. So let's say var volume equals, and then we want to set the volume of the video, which we said can be done with this property, video.volume equals volume. And it's just that simple. So let's run it and see what we get. Notice it's getting much quieter. It jumps back up. So it's working just as we'd like it to. So the nice thing about this is, but since we added the values as a custom attribute, the values of these don't matter. So we could say anything besides 0, 1 through 10. We could even have these be, images or colors. You'll see a lot of times on a video that you click on an audio button and it pops up, a range that you can click in somewhere. You could do the same thing with this, just with a little bit of CSS styling. So that gives us all of our basic controls, and all of the controls you typically see on a video, whether it be full screen or anything like that, can all be duplicated with the JavaScript API for these videos. In the next video, we're going to look at some other stuff we can do and how we can take it to the next level when we start mixing the HTML5 video and Canvas.